What is the process of purchasing a home? When you're looking to purchase a home, at the end of this video, you're going to have an idea really of how this process works. Is there a straight line from the beginning to the end? Spoiler alert here. The spoiler alert is going to be that there's no straight line. What happens when you're looking to purchase a home? The first thing that you want to do is actually first make the decision you want to purchase a home. Once you make the decision to purchase the home, you want to start going in the direction to purchase the home. If you have decided to purchase a home and you want to buy a $5 million home and you don't make the wage or you don't make the amount of money that you need to get that $5 million home, if you go look at the $5 million home first, you will be really disappointed with what you can actually afford. Many times people don't start off with the intention, they don't start off with the direct response of my first home's gonna be $5 million. It's not reasonable. But sometimes people do, and many times people will start off with, I want to purchase a home, that's the home that I want, I'm gonna go look at that house, and then they find out they can't afford it. So what you want to do is get pre-approved. Inside the pre-approval process, you want to make sure that you're working with the right loan officer. It used to be that you can go to the bank, and just going to the bank is not always the right and best method. You want to work with a loan officer who is proven with their track record that they can close the transaction. It is no longer very easy and simple process. There are a lot of different steps to take just on the lending side. And so it's very important that you do get pre-approved. Inside the pre-approval process, they're going to tell you how much you can afford. And once you find out how much you can afford, then we can start to look for a home. And once you start to look for the home, now you need to decide, what does the home that I can afford look like? Is that home going to be a 3 or a 4 bedroom? Is it going to be a 2 or a 1 bedroom? Is it going to have a kitchen? Is it going to have 4 baths, 2 baths, 3 baths? Many times with that, you want to take a look at the size of your family. Sometimes it's a matter of preference and how you want to live, if you have guests, things of that nature. So when I looked at that house and how much can I afford, is it going to be $2 million? Is it going to be $1.5 million, $700,000? So really look at the necessities first. And the necessities are going to be, what can I afford? Is it feasible for me to do a 3-bedroom house with the family size that I have or the needs that I have? Then I'll look at the homes. And many times the commute will come into play also. And so then you want to look, if I live in San Jose and I work in Palo Alto or I work in Milpitas, what does the house that I can afford look like in San Jose? What does the neighborhood look like that I want to live in San Jose? Start putting these pieces of the puzzle together. Once you have identified what you can afford and you have identified the type of neighborhood that you want or the amount of bedrooms that work best for you, then it's time to start shopping. And once you start shopping, that's the fun part. It really does become fun. Then we have a conversation about what is it you're looking for, what areas do you want to be in, and how best do we move forward from here. Once you identify a home, there are a couple of things that you'll need to provide. One of those things will be a pre-approval letter. We want to show the seller that even before you go into the home, that you can afford the home. And when we make the offer, we want to show the seller that we're not going to have an issue with the lending, or we're not going to have an issue with you being able to afford the home. And there are some other things that we'll have to provide as well. One of them is going to be the proof of funds of the down payment. And the down payment can be different sizes. It doesn't have to be one specific size. And it's also going to be the purchase agreement. The purchase agreement is something that I'll work with you on. Myself or your agent will work with you on. And we're going through that process. Inside of the purchase agreement itself, there are a couple of key things that we go through as we're doing the purchase agreement. So you find the home that you like, we have the pre-approval letter, you have the funds to close. With the purchase agreement, we're going to identify what type of contingencies, if any, are going to work for the home. If there have been no inspections done, then we will ask for an inspection contingency. There's 3 main contingencies that we typically look at going into a purchase as the buyer. One of the contingencies is going to be a loan contingency. There will be an appraisal contingency and there will be an inspection contingency. Out of those 3 contingencies, what we want to do is identify which contingencies are necessary. Once that offer is accepted, it's traditional for us in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area to put 3% earnest money deposit or EMD. And that's going to be 3% once the offer is accepted. Many times, if you go by the default of the contract, it's a 3-day time frame that money needs to go into escrow. And many times we'll have it in the contract to be in a little sooner, just to let the seller know that you're serious and you're ready to move forward. And that's the reason for that. Now, with that 3% earnest money deposit, if you have a contingency in place and you remove that contingency, whether it is the appraisal contingency, whether it's the inspection contingency or the loan contingency, if you remove that contingency before you're actually ready and something happens to where you cannot perform on that loan, on that appraisal, or on that inspection, your 3% earnest money deposit is then in jeopardy. And one thing that's important to know is that it would not go automatically to the seller. There would be an arbitrator that actually is involved with that, and the arbitrator's job is to make sure that nobody's happy. And so at the end of it all, that is ultimately how a contingency removed prematurely happens. So it's very important as we're moving through the process that the contingencies are in place that need to be in place. It's important that the purchase agreement, the contract, is negotiated in a strong position for you as the buyer and a favorable position for the seller to accept. So the contract, the purchase agreement, will bring you together. As we go through the process, now we have the contingencies in place. The earnest money deposit is going to go into escrow. Escrow's position is a neutral third party. And as a neutral third party, in Northern California, in Silicon Valley, escrow and title will be the same company. There's just one person that you're dealing with typically in escrow and title. It's going to be the escrow officer, and the title is kind of on the back end of escrow. And so the escrow officer will work with title officers inside their office to make sure everything is going properly. As a buyer, your main objective is to purchase the home. We also want to make sure that as the buyer of the home, of the property, you don't have any surprises after you close. So that's why we do want to make sure that the loan is going to be approved, and we do want to make sure that the property is going to appraise. And so moving forward, once you put that 3% earnest money deposit via wire into escrow, then we're moving forward from there. And if there's a contingency in place, we'll make sure that we move forward to check the box or the boxes of the contingencies to make sure that they can be removed safely. Once we are there and once you have removed the contingencies, then moving forward, you'll be working with the lender, with the loan officer, with the underwriter to make sure that the loan is going to close on time. During the process, you can go back to the property, you can look at measuring it. It gets very exciting to measure the space where the couch goes, to measure the space where the TV goes, of course. But all of these things are very fun to measure the windows for blinds as well, of course. And so as you're moving forward, we're still taking those steps. And you're going to work with escrow. And inside of escrow, first, you'll put the earnest money deposit into escrow. It's a 3% earnest money deposit. And moving forward, escrow is going to hold that, and that money does go towards your down payment, does go towards your closing costs. During the process, if you have a loan, the lender will have an appraisal done. You'll pay for the appraisal as the buyer, and the appraiser is going to be a neutral third party. The appraiser cannot have any influence from the agents or from the loan officer. This was a law that was changed back in 2010 because of the housing crash in 2008. And so no one else really has access to manipulate the appraisal or the appraiser to come in at a higher value, come in at a lower value. As a seller, you can feel safer with an appraisal contingency because it's a third party who's doing the appraisal. As a loan, if you have a contingency for a loan, the lender is going to let the seller know or the buyer know if that loan is moving forward. So if you have a contingency from a loan, then it's going to be the lender who is writing that letter that the loan is working out or not. If you have a contingency as an inspection, then it's going to be you as the buyer, and if I'm working with you as the agent, to determine whether or not you want to move forward from any inspections that come up. And that could be you as the buyer walking into the home and saying, I didn't realize that this window was so small. I would like to cancel the contract because of this visual inspection that I just did. As you can see, the contingencies have very specific meanings unless it's an inspection contingency. So from the seller's perspective, they're going to want to make sure any contingencies are very pointed contingencies. Now, once we get past the contingencies and once we get past the inspections are done by inspectors. In California, the inspectors are licensed. And so if a seller has done inspections up front, it is up to the buyer as to whether or not they feel comfortable with the inspections that have been done. Many times buyers do feel comfortable with the inspections that have been done. And so they feel comfortable removing the inspection contingency unless there's something else. If it's a condominium or a townhouse and the HOA has not given the documents, there is a separate box for that. However, the inspection contingency, if those documents are not done, the inspection contingency is still a viable contingency to have. Absolutely. So moving forward from there, we do have the appraiser, who's a neutral third party. We have the escrow, who's a neutral third party as well. So from there, as the escrow, we also have the inspector. If you hire an inspector, just like if the seller hires an inspector, you can't expect the inspector to call different things out. It's not fair and it doesn't work well inside the contract. If you have an inspector, if the seller has not ordered an inspection or does not have an inspection, and you as the buyer order or get an inspection done, you can't lean on the inspector and expect them to point things out that are not there. It's just not fair. These are some of the different people that are involved inside of a transaction. Now, when we get to the end of the purchase, super exciting. Many times it's 30 days, sometimes it's a little less, and if it's cash, it's a lot faster. But once we get to the end of the transaction to purchase and do the final sale, a couple of days before the closing of escrow, we will do a walkthrough. And in the walkthrough, we want to make sure that there's no holes in the walls, nothing that was there before. If the house was staged, sometimes we can't see different smudges on the floor, things of that nature. But really what we want to do is we want to make sure that the house is in the same type of condition the first time we walk through as it is the final walkthrough. That's the purpose of the final walkthrough, to make sure everything is still in standing order. And then you're going to get super excited, and then you'll be going to escrow to sign the closing documents. Now, in California, it's a little different, and we can actually, many times, we'll have a mobile notary, and the mobile notary will be from escrow. Many times, a retired escrow officer or somebody who used to be in the escrow service, and they are hired by escrow to make sure that they're sending out people who are valid and who can do it without a problem and answer any questions that you have. Escrow will hire the mobile notary to make sure that they come out, they answer any questions that you have, and that they are certified with that escrow company. And before I forget, as we're doing the purchase agreement, I always like to go over the purchase agreement with you ahead of time to make sure that it's not the first time you're looking at it. So when I first sit down with you, I will go over the purchase agreement with you. And as the purchase agreement, I'll go over it with you again once we actually decide to make that offer. What we do now, many of times, it's no longer driving back and forth. At the beginning of my career, sometimes we used to joke about being a glorified courier because we would go back and forth so many times. So now we have DocuSign. We will put the offer together and then everything's going to be via DocuSign. So when we submit that offer to the seller, everything will be via DocuSign, everything is time-stamped, and everything is legal that way. We no longer have to do it with PIN. However, some clients still do prefer to do it that way. Now, when you're sitting down at escrow and you have that big pile of documents in front of you to sign, that's going to be when you have to do your finger exercises because those have got to be wet signatures. So those have got to be your actual wet signatures. We can no longer DocuSign. Unless you're buying with cash, then that's a different story, and I'll let escrow explain that to you. Ultimately, many times, if you're purchasing a home, and we have our schedules, especially coming back after COVID, our schedules tend to be a little different. Not everybody's in the house at the same time. We can't get to a meeting with the kids, and so a mobile notary, it makes it much easier for a mobile notary to come out to your home, and the mobile notary will pick up the documents from escrow, and will take those documents to your house to sign. Once you have signed those documents, there's a few different terms going into it that you're going to need. One's going to be the clear to close. The lender is going to give a clear to close, and then a couple of days after that, once you sign and you accept the fees that the lender is offering, once you sign that clear to close, the lender will set the date that you can sign the final paperwork. Going into escrow, you'll sign a big stack of papers that need to have a wet signature. From that point moving forward, after the clear to close, the next things that you're going to want to look for is when you go into escrow will have already given you a number that you need to bring And many times that number is going to be within a few $100s, and they'll usually put a padding on that number so that you'll either bring cashier's check or a wire. Many times it's going to be a wire, and many times escrow prefers the wire. But you can talk to your escrow officer or the specific scenario. You can work through that with your agent or escrow officer. So with that wire, the escrow officer is going to have specific instructions for you. It's important to know that the instructions coming from escrow, with escrow and with this business, there are big dollars involved. And so naturally, thieves will want to get their fingers into it if they can. If anything ever looks off as far as the escrow officer's name or the office, the email, if their logo looks off, always confirm with your voice as well as the email that everything is correct and everything's right. So you will have a number to bring with you or to wire into escrow before or after you sign the final documents. Once you've signed those final documents, you'll be looking from the bank. The next step is going to be called funding. So funding is super exciting because that's when all the funds come together into the escrow account, the neutral third party where funds come together. All of the funds will come together. The escrow officer will have the wire. The funds will be in from the bank. The funds will be in from you as the buyer, and that's going to be funded. So then the loan and the deal or the transaction has been funded. From that point moving forward, the next thing you're looking for is the recording. Many times for us, it depends on the county that somebody is actually closing in, but it depends on the county. Sometimes they'll do a special recording. So let's say that you sign on Tuesday and on Wednesday morning it's funded. So sometimes you can have a special recording by that afternoon, by Wednesday afternoon, if you sign on Tuesday night. Sometimes you'll have to wait for Tuesday and then Wednesday and then have the final recording on Thursday. So the next step is going to be funding after you sign. That's when all the funds come together. And then you're looking for recording. Recording's super exciting because that's when the keys actually change hands, and that's when you collect the keys. But what recording means is that the documents that have been gathered and the deed of trust has been signed and transferred over, and it's been recorded down at the county that the house is in. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of purchasing a property. I kind of jumped around a little bit, but I want to make sure that you're educated in this process because it's very important. If you have any questions at all, I'm always here and happy to help. And if you have any ideas for videos, I love doing videos. They're a lot of fun, and I love to be educated on different things, and I love to push the knowledge out that I get as I'm learning these different things. But this is what I've been doing for a long time, is selling houses and working in real estate. I love real estate. I love working with people inside of real estate and answering questions and helping folks. So any questions at all, I'm always here and happy to help. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.